Hey guys, how's it going? It is Matt with the Hoopsology podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I am a one-man Wolfpack today. Justin, as you guys know, if you were listening last week, he has moved out of state. He is getting settled in Colorado. We've got a simple episode today. I wanted to review with you guys my playoff picks and predictions for this first round that has just started. I hand on my heart, promise. I made these picks before the Lakers beat the Warriors. So before the play in games were finished, I think you guys will hear some picks that, based on what's already happened in the playoffs, might make me look pretty foolish on these picks. So I think you're going to believe that I picked these before the first round got started. But I'm looking forward to sharing these picks with you guys and hopefully hearing your guys' predictions in the comments here. Thank you, as always, for supporting the show. Couple housekeeping things. We are a part of the Off the Glass Basketball Podcast Network. You can go to otgbasketball.com to check out our podcast page, along with several other great podcast pages. There's one of my favorite podcast titles of all time. It's Always Something in Philadelphia, a great Sixers podcast if you want to check them out. There are a lot of team-based podcasts there. So if you want the scoop on the Nets, you can check out a Nets specific podcast. You can check out, there's one for the Heat, one for the Pacers, one for the Celtics. There are several others. So I know I won't be able to list everyone off in there, but there are a lot of great podcasts there. So be sure to check it out. As always, you can check us out. Hoopsologypod@gmail.com is our email. If you want to send any feedback or any questions, comments, etc., we always appreciate that. If you want to check us out on social media, just search for Hoopsology Pod and you will find us. We are most active on Twitter, but we post a lot of stuff to Facebook and Instagram as well. And of course, you can listen to us anywhere you are listening to podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, share on both of those. Give us a 5-star rating in iTunes. Really helps us out. Okay, enough of that. Let's fill you guys in on what has gone down so far in the first round. It is Sunday night. And right now, the Grizzlies are extra spicy, leading by 15 points with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter here. So it does look like the Grizzlies are going to get the first win in this 1-8 series, Jazz being the 1 seed. So they might pull off a shocker for this first game. So very interesting there. But to look overall at what's happened, just about every team has played a game once this Grizzlies Jazz game concludes tonight. So we have, presumptively, unless crazier things have happened, but let's just assume Grizzlies get the win. They're going to be up 1-0 on the 1 seed Jazz. The 4 seed Clippers are down. Dallas leads 1-0. Dallas is the 5 seed. Denver, the 3 seed, versus Portland, the 6 seed. Portland got the first game. Phoenix and the Lakers, Phoenix being the 2 seed, Lakers being the 7 seed, they played earlier today, and Phoenix held on to win in spite of some injury concerns with Chris Paul. Phoenix leads 1-0. Looking at the East, we have the 76ers won their first game, took care of business. The Wizards kept it closer than I thought they might. Philadelphia pulls off the win by 7 points. They are the 1 seed in the East versus the Wizards, who are the 8 seed. 4 seed Knicks lost. Trae Young getting the job done for Atlanta, the 5 seed. Atlanta leads 1-0. Milwaukee's the 3 seed. Rematch from last year, playing the 6 seed Miami Heat. Milwaukee got the first win, game 1 in overtime. So Milwaukee leads 1-0. And the 2 seed Brooklyn Nets took care of business as well in their first game against the 7 seed Boston Celtics. So that's where we are right now. And again, really simple episode today. I wanted to give you guys my picks for this first round, maybe some thoughts on what might happen later on in the playoffs. So I want to go back to the West, and we're just going to go down team by team. And I just want to give you guys my picks and kind of some thoughts real quickly about how I think that series will play out. So I projected the Jazz. I have penciled in here versus either Golden State versus Memphis. We know now that Memphis won that play-in game and are in the playoffs, leading in game one. I have the Jazz winning in 5, so they would have to sweep the rest of the way. Reason being, regardless of whether they played Golden State or Memphis, I just thought the Jazz were so much deeper, and they've been on fire through the regular season. Some historically great offensive numbers, especially from the three-point line. So it's going to be interesting to see, if John Morant can get a couple more wins here. I still don't think Memphis can pull off the upset. But man, if they did, that's just going to raise John Morant's star status even more than he already did in that play-in game. But again, at the end of the day, I think the Jazz are just too deep, too complete of a team. And if they can slow John Morant down, I think they wrap this up in 5 was my projection. That might get pushed back a little bit if John Morant keeps doing John Morant things. So let's move on to the 4 seed LA Clippers versus the 5 seed Dallas Mavericks. And this is basically a series of how many times can Luka Doncic go off? He did go off in game 1, and we see Dallas taking the early lead. Still, I like my pick of the Clippers in 6. I just think, again, the Clippers have too much, and you'd have to think if there's any sense of redeeming yourself from last year, from a very disappointing playoff performance, you'd have to think the Clippers are going to show up. So far, they did not in game 1. I would expect that to turn around here. And I would still expect the Clippers to wrap this series up in 6 games. Again, this is another thing where it wouldn't be as big of a shocker as it would have been last year. But if Luka Doncic can carry the Mavericks over the Clippers, again, another thing that would really elevate his star status. And I think we are in an interesting time in the league quickly, just where, we have LeBron James, who is 36 years old. And I think people are a lot of people, let's face it, casual sports fans have had LeBron fatigue for a long time. Even people who have supported him in the past, like myself, I feel a little bit of LeBron fatigue. So, you've got 2 guys in these series already. Like John Morant is going to be a future star in this league. Donovan Mitchell to place another, and then Luka Doncic, of course. These are all guys who could be kind of the next big things in the league. I think Luka is really the only one I see that has the potential to be that kind of next face of the NBA by way of his talent and his dominance in the game. But the league, I think, is kind of hungry for this sort of changing of a guard. So this playoffs in general, this could be one of the big narratives if the Lakers were to exit early, if Phoenix can keep up what they're doing. But again, reining this in at the 4-5, I have the Clippers winning this series in 6. Let me know if you guys agree. Moving on to the 3 seed Denver Nuggets versus the 6 seed Portland Trailblazers. The Blazers, I've never believed in their defense. I've never really believed in them as a complete team. They have been on fire lately. They've been rolling towards the end of the season. So I'm very nervous making my pick. Just to state my bias here, I mean, I like the Nuggets. They're kind of like my adopted team since last year. The Rockets, as we know, are my team, but they are not making any noise this year, sitting at the bottom of the standings since that James Harden move. So the Nuggets are one of those teams that I root for. They're fairly close to us in Albuquerque. They're bordering state, so I want to see them do well. I do have the Nuggets in 6. I also thought the Nuggets were going to be the 1 seed of the Western Conference this year. That didn't play out. They struggled early. Kind of disappointing season overall, but they did end up with the 3 seed. So I don't know. Jokic is still a big factor in this, and I just don't know that Portland can stop them. But as I mentioned earlier, they did take game one. So, they do have enough offensive firepower on this Portland team to where if Aaron Gordon isn't going to be able to slow people down, if they can't find someone to slow Damian Lillard and the Portland backcourt in general, if they can't find someone to slow them down, they might be in some real trouble here. And it might not matter that they have home court advantage, that they can maybe, kind of run and gun uh, in altitude. So I don't know. I still like the Nuggets in 6, but I will definitely classify myself as worried at this point in the series with Portland getting that quick win. Moving along, our last series in the West, the 2 seed Phoenix Suns versus the 7 seed LA Lakers. The Lakers are the best defense in the league, for one thing. The Lakers won the title last year. The Lakers, in my opinion, have the best duo of talent in the league. I think they proved that last year with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, 2 of the most versatile players in the history of the sport, teaming up together. But, of course, there were back injury concerns with Anthony Davis during the season. LeBron James had that high ankle sprain that he famously said he thinks he'll never be 100% again. So there's a lot of drama in Los Angeles, as per usual. So I did pick Phoenix won today. Phoenix is up 1-0, as I mentioned. But I did pick the Lakers winning this series in 6. I'm sorry, Josh, if you're listening to this. I did pick the Lakers in 6 just because I need to see LeBron James exit in the first round. I'm not going to pick him to exit in the first round. And let's keep in mind, too, that LeBron James has a history of losing game one of series and then just wrecking teams afterwards. It happened several times when he was on the Miami Heat. It's happened several times in his career. LeBron James has been almost an automatic ticket to the NBA Finals since 2011. So I just need to see an early exit to believe it. It's going to happen at some point because Father Time is undefeated. I just don't see that happening this year. And I think if AD is aggressive, the Suns don't really have an answer for him to slow him down. So a lot of this series will depend on that too. But hey, I'm personally rooting for the Suns. I would like to see Chris Paul advance far into the playoffs, if not win a title for that team. I just respect Chris Paul's game, and I would like to see that more for myself as a fan than seeing LeBron James potentially win another title. But this Lakers team is talented. They're deep. They're built for the playoffs. They have a nice path now, oddly enough, in the 7 seed, where if they get this series done in Phoenix, they're going to have, I think, a fairly easy walk, at least into the Western Conference Finals. So I still got to pick the Lakers. They're just deeper, and we've seen it happen before. Whereas Phoenix, there's a little bit more to overcome. There's a little bit more that they need to prove. But we'll see. Go Suns. I hope they pull it off. Let's move into the Eastern Conference here. And our 1-8 matchup is the Philadelphia 76ers, the best team in the East, versus the Washington Wizards, a team that got through the play-in tournament by beating the Indiana Pacers in the second game of the play-in tournament, losing to the Celtics in the first game of the play-in tournament, as I'm sure you recall. So the Wizards are fun, but it's really a two-man show. It's the Russell Westbrook and the Bradley Beal show. You got to love their heart. You got to love their talent. But I just have no faith in the Wizards to be able to match up with this 76ers team. The Sixers are decked, and they're built well for this. They only really, in my opinion, have to slow down Bradley Beal. You just match Ben Simmons up against Bradley Beal to slow him down, to agitate him. And then you let Russell Westbrook shoot if he wants to shoot. You let him kind of self-destruct. He's never really had a huge amount of success in the playoffs, especially on his own as one of the key stars. Of course, yes, he did make the finals early on in OKC with Kevin Durant carrying a lot of that load as well, though. And as you recall, James Harden on that team. Um, with him being one of the primary two guys, he really just has not had the same amount of playoff success. So I just don't buy the Wizards. This was the only series that I picked to be a sweep. Philadelphia in 4 games in this series. Let's move to, I think, one of the most interesting matchups in this entire first round. Although I will say, to pause real quickly here, I love almost all of these matchups, even when I think it's not going to be super competitive. I think there are interesting things to watch for in each series. Like even who would have thought Jazz versus Grizzlies might be really interesting? I think it is, because you have Donovan Mitchell again and John Morant, like 2 guys that are rising stars in the league. So I digress. But one of the, maybe the most interesting series, and I certainly picked it that way, the New York Knicks at the 4 seed versus the 5 seed Atlanta Hawks. So this is one of those picks where I think I'm going to look really foolish for picking it this way. And you might not agree with my pick. That's fine. Most of sports media, I would say, does not agree with this pick. I picked the Knicks in 7 games. I think the Hawks are more talented. I think the Hawks are deeper. I think the Knicks have just as good a coaching, and the Knicks have an identity. And that sounds really cheesy and corny, but I think for the first round against a Hawks team that has potential weaknesses, with Trae Young being a volume scorer, look, it's not looking this way so far. It's not looking like it's going to play out this way. We'll see what happens. I love the Knicks team defense. I think that could serve them well in the first round. Atlanta won game 1 with Trae Young. Let's see what happens here. I have this going 7 games. But again, it's looking like, this could be the Hawks winning this in 5 or 6 games. It wouldn't shock me. I'm going to stick with my pick of the Knicks in 7. Let's move to the 3 seed versus the 6 seed. Milwaukee Bucks at the 3 seed versus the 6 seed Miami Heat. You guys that have listened to the podcasts before know that the Heat are one of my favorite Eastern Conference team. I totally buy into Heat culture, all this stuff, that maybe it's a little hokey to other fans, but I think the Heat buy into that. I think the Heat do work harder than other teams. I do think that, you see things like Udonis Haslem going at Dwight Howard, which is now a meme. You see things like this, and I think this team lives up to some of the, I guess, stereotypical Heat culture type stuff. This team does work hard. This team does have a certain way that they act. But in spite of that, I've regretted picking the Bucks last year. They made me look foolish. I do think with Drew Holiday on that roster now, this is a different Bucks team. This is a different fit here. I also think in some ways there should be more pressure on this team, but I almost feel like with Giannis signing that extension, there's almost less pressure because you're going to have less media narratives like, oh, is Giannis going to be leaving if they lose this series? I don't see it happening that way. I see the Bucks winning in 6. The Bucks did win game 1, though it was very close. I have the Bucks in 6. Let's see how this plays out. I think this Heat team, Tyler Hero, among others, have struggled with injuries, struggled with different things. I just don't think this is a team that's going to catch anyone off guard this year like they did last year. So I do have the Bucks winning this in 6, and I hope it happens this way because down the road, I do want to see this 2-3 matchup. I want to see the Nets have to get through the Bucks and the Sixers potentially to get into the Eastern Conference Finals. And let's go ahead and move on to our last series here. And let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets versus the Boston Celtics. Um, Look, I don't think the Celtics have much left in the tank. Jaylen Brown, of course, had the injury that ended his season just about a week ago. So that was devastating for the Celtics. Obviously, you're now relying on Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker to carry you guys. And I just don't think it's enough to keep up with the Nets. I almost think, no disrespect intended, but I almost think the Nets could play how they've played the entire season and have two of their stars play, one of their stars rest, and be able to get through this series in six. It looks like they're going to be able to continue playing their three superstars together with that super team that is formed, and win this in five is what I have projected. So Nets in five. So that would make for in the West, again, predictions real quick. Jazz in five over the Grizzlies, which would set them up to match up against the Clippers, who I have winning in six against the Mavericks. That's going to be a tough series. Both teams have been great from beyond the arc all season long. I promised myself that I wasn't going to trust the Clippers until they really showed me something. They dropped that first game against the Mavericks. So at this point, I would pick the Jazz against the Clippers to advance into the Western Conference Finals. Let's see how that continues. The 3 seed Nuggets in the first round, I have them winning in six over the Trailblazers. That looks bad so far. Let's see what happens. That would put them against the Lakers, who I have winning in 6 games against the Phoenix Suns. The Suns won game 1. Go Suns. Let's see how that plays out. I would pick the Lakers over the Nuggets, as most people would. I think most of sports media agrees with me on that. So then that would put our Western Conference final as the Lakers versus the Jazz. At this point, I would pick the Lakers to advance to the West or to the NBA Finals. Yuck. I don't want to see that happen, but I think it is likely at this point. We'll see what happens. In the East, just to recap, I have the Sixers with my only first round sweep in 4 games over the Wizards. I have the Knicks in 7 versus the 5 seed Hawks. That would place the Sixers versus the Knicks in round 2. I would definitely pick the Sixers, and I think that would be in 5, maybe 6 games. So that would put the 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals. I could see that likely happening. Again, to recap, Milwaukee I have in 6 versus the Heat. That would match them up against the Nets, who I have in 5 versus the Celtics. And the Nets right now, I'm going to have to see them be defeated for me to believe it. I do think the Bucks could make it interesting, but I would pick the Nets in 7 at this point, which would set up a matchup of the Sixers versus the Nets. I think this could be really interesting because the Sixers second round matchup against the Knicks is easier comparatively than the Nets second round matchup against the Bucks. So you might see a much better rested Sixers team. You have a deeper-ish Sixers team, but we need the Sixers. We need Embiid and Simmons both to stay healthy. We know that Simmons was injured last year in the playoffs, and that cost the Sixers big time, opened the doors wide open for the Heat to advance. So we need the Sixers to stay healthy, but I do think they are probably the team best equipped to match up with the Nets. For that reason, I will pick the Nets because of star power, because of talent, in 7 against the Sixers in the Eastern Conference Finals. I hate it. I don't like this pick, but there's so much talent on this Lakers team. There's so much talent on this Nets team that I am just going to pick them until I see them defeated. I just don't really have faith in other teams' firepower to be able to match up against that. What I am rooting for personally, I'm basically rooting for almost anyone else to make it out of either of these conferences. So in the East, I would say I'm most rooting for the 76ers. Those of you who have listened before probably know I'm a big Joel Embiid fan. I think when he's engaged, it's awesome to see a big dominate the way he can at times. Sometimes, yes, I wish he would play inside more, but I would want, and I'm not a big Philadelphia sports fan. I don't root for any Philadelphia teams really, but I like the 76ers. I like how this team is built. I would like to see them make it over the Nets, but I'm just not picking that on my list. Out of the West, who would I most like to see? Well, a couple teams that I would be happy with. I would probably be most happy for the Trailblazers in some ways, just because of Damian Lillard, his mentality, his loyalty to that organization at this point. I think it's very difficult to root against Damian Lillard. So I would be a big fan of the Trailblazers making it. I just see that as very, very unlikely. Obviously, I didn't even pick them in the first round. Denver, you guys know already from the start of this podcast, I like the Nuggets. I would like to see them advance. I think that would terrify the NBA front office. I also would like to see Luka rise if he could advance and get past the Clippers in this first round and just surprise people, just go off. He's just super fun to watch, super creative on offense, but I don't think Dallas has the overall depth at this point. They could be there maybe in another 2 years or so. I just don't see it happening right now as that team is constructed, obviously. So really, the other one that I alluded to earlier, the Suns. Yeah, if the Suns made it, again, that's another one that I don't think the NBA main office would like in terms of ratings, in terms of a market. But I think for Chris Paul to get a championship, to kind of get that weight off his shoulders of being this one of the greatest point guards of all time by the numbers, to have never made it to the finals for one thing, and then to have never won a championship, I think that would be cool to see. I think it would be nice for Suns fans who have had a big playoff drought that they got that first playoff win, first in a long, long time, I think over a decade, if I'm not mistaken. And to have them get back to the finals for the first time since 93 would be great too. There's one of my cats. Hello from Jeffrey. So those are kind of the things I'm rooting for. So a whole plethora of teams in the West that I would be happy to see. And the 76ers, who I would be happy to see from the Eastern Conference make their way up. So that's what I have. Those are my first round playoff predictions. Let me know. Do you guys agree, disagree? Let me know on social media, on our Hoopsology pod account. Let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. Check out our interview library, whether that be audio on our podcast feed or on our YouTube interview channel. Support the show, like, share, comment, subscribe. We really appreciate you guys. Justin and I will be back. We are talking about maybe doing a middle of the week episode to kind of make up for missing out on being together for this episode. But thank you so much for your support. We will be in touch again soon. I hope you guys have a wonderful start to your week, and we will catch up again later. Peace.